Let's talk about diuretics. So what are diuretics? So diuretics are usually used to increase urine flow. So instances of polyuria would be great. Instances of someone being susceptible to a diuretic. So basically, what is a diuretic? Something that makes you pee a lot, depending on what the concentration is, right? And so what's really important about the different mechanisms of inhibition, right? So what is the function of most diuretics? When we look at antidiuretics, what do antidiuretics do? Antidiuretics cause a lot of water retention. So diuretics cause water release or water secretion. So we're going to talk about the different mechanisms of how any kind of inhibition of these specific osmotic pathways can lead to instances of polyuria and very dilute urine due to the presence of a term for diuretics. All right, so perfect example of a diuretic is inhibitors of ADH. So what was ADH? ADH is antidiuretic hormone. Where is it produced? Where is antidiuretic hormone produced? So antidiuretic is produced in the hypothalamus, but it's stored and secreted from the posterior pituitary. Common misconception that happens. And so a perfect example of an antidiuretic inhibitor, hormone inhibitor, is alcohol. So alcohol inhibits the actual secretion of antidiuretic hormone. So perfect example is, you're going out trying to have a good time and you decide, you know what, today is going to be the day that I'm just going to overdo it and I'm just going to drink so much because I want to test this hypothesis that if I drink all this alcohol, it'll just make me pee and make me pee more and more and more. All right. So what happens is you drink a lot very unresponsibly, you pass out, quote unquote, blackout, and you wake up the next morning on someone else's lawn and you notice you have a big headache. So what do you think that headache is a symptom of? One of the biggest symptoms of headache or quote unquote hangover is excessive alcohol. And whenever you drink a lot of alcohol, it causes you to not release this antidiuretic hormone. No antidiuretic hormone, no fluid retention. So that headache that you feel is one of the symptoms of any kinds of dehydration. So dehydration is one of the another symptoms of patients that or people in this case that use a lot of diuretics. Another example, let's see. We want to talk about any kind of sodium pump inhibitors. So when we think about sodium pump inhibitors specifically here, a great example is any kinds of coffee, drugs, so sodium pump inhibitors. So specifically, we're talking about sodium reabsorption. So think where reabsorption takes place. So reabsorption takes place in the distal convoluted tubules in the kidneys. So like I said, the perfect examples of these different kinds of drugs that we have is, for example, drugs. Certain drugs can cause this. Caffeine, coffee, so patients that drink a lot of coffee. Certain drugs that we talked about. What else? Instances of hypertension. So when your body has a high blood pressure, and edemas. So edemas is another great example of inhibited reabsorption of fluid. And it makes sense too, right? So if you want to have an excessive level of fluid buildup, you want to release that as much as possible. So if you have edema, any kind of edema or any kind of high blood pressure, you want to bring this fluid, this trapped fluid, edema, from different parts of your tissue out and excrete it out as urine. So the reabsorption is inhibited. Hypertension, same thing. You want to bring your blood volume down. That's one mechanism, is bringing your blood volume down in order to decrease the blood pressure, which eventually can cause, any kind of homeostatic balances that's going to take place with the pressure gradients in your bloodstream. Coffee is an example of a great diuretic where it inhibits the sodium reabsorption taking place in the distal convoluted tube. And there's certain drugs, many drugs that act as reabsorption. And so again, a lot of people, for example, when you drink a lot of coffee, you're wondering, why do I get headaches again? Sometimes again. Perfect example is when you drink a lot of coffee, you inhibit this reabsorption. So fluid does not enter your bloodstream, it gets secreted out the renal system. Other diuretics that we have is diuretics of the loop of Henle. So loop of Henle was what? Where? So it was after the proximal convoluted tubule. This is located in the renal medulla. So there's a drug here, Lasix, that inhibits a pump. Specifically, it is a sodium chloride pump. So which region of the loop of Henle has the sodium chloride pump? That channel pump that is required with active transport. That's in the ascending. So if you remember in the ascending, there's only permeable to sodium. So going upwards, all right, so you have this Lasix, which is also another form of diuretic, which inhibits the sodium to coming into the extracellular fluid, eventually going into the bloodstream. So this loop of Henle is also another form of inhibitors. So inhibitors of this is, so this Lasix inhibits these sodium chloride pumps. And remember, they're active transport. What does that mean? That they require some kind of ATP. Okay? And then also there is osmotic. Oops. Let's keep the colors as symmetric as possible. And there's some osmotic diuretics. So what does that mean, osmotic diuretics? Well, there's instances, osmolarity diseases that cause for a lot of secretion of certain metabolites in your urine. Perfect example, diabetes mellitus. Let's grab here. Diabetes mellitus. So diabetes mellitus is a phenomenon where there is an abnormal reabsorption of sugar, and so you have a buildup of sugar in your bloodstream, and so in order to fix this reabsorption in order to dilute out this blood, because there's a homeostatic imbalance with osmolarity, your kidneys begin to secrete out sugar into your urine, specifically in your bladder. And so eventually what happens is, in order to maintain the osmotic balance in the urine, because again, the urine has a lot of sugar, so the osmolarity is high or low. It's high, so high solute to solvent ratio, which means that there needs to be an instance where we have an increased secretion of water to the urine in order to dilute the urine out because of this problem. So these patients, again, exhibit instances of dehydration, which again can lead to certain kinds of peripheral neuropathies, and if not treated, eventually can lead to death. So these are 4 examples of diuretics that take place in the body, and there's different mechanism how it happens, right? So there's multiple more, but again, here's just some for fun.